The Smithsonian Faculty Fellowship Program represents a rewarding academic professional development opportunity for faculty at Montgomery College. The fellowships are a product of a unique collaboration between Montgomery College and Smithsonian Center for Education and Museum Studies. It's the first of its kind between the Smithsonian Institution and a community college.
R. Scott Hengen earned an MFA in theater with an emphasis on scenic design from the University of Maryland in College Park. Before earning the MFA, he taught technical theater at Suitland High School, the Prince George's County Magnet High School for the Performing Arts. He earned a BS in secondary education and a BA in theater with a minor in Shakespeare from Penn State University. He has designed professionally for Adventure Theater, Only Theater, the Bay Theater Company, and Everyman Theater. Scott serves as the production coordinator and archivist for the theater department. He designs scenery, properties, and projections for Montgomery College Theater Productions and maintains the web presence for the Speech, Dance, and Theater Department. He is the co-coordinator for the Maryland Area Community College Performing Arts Collective.
Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate you coming today. Thank you once again to Mimi Mann, Sarah Ducey, Susan Hoffman, of course, Dean Preston, Dean of the Arts, Dean Carolyn Terry, of course, Manjula Kumar, and Dr. Pearl. Thank you very much for allowing us to do this. And thank you again to all my cohorts who joined us on this incredible trip. I teach technical theater in the theater department. I don't have a very large class, but the class that we did have had quite a ride this semester. We did a lot of visitations online and in person. This theme for this semester was defining the American identity, and the course that I taught was Theater 208, Drafting and Painting for the Arts, for the theater in particular. And what we did was we started off participating in the Smithsonian by intertwining questions of that identity and working with the resources at the Smithsonian. We intertwined it with scenic design theory and plays that are currently produced in the DC area. We didn't stick to the classics. We moved on to what was current and made it more of an impact for our students because they saw plays that were being produced in the DC area and worked with that material to work on their own projects. This allowed the students to synthesize the resources at the Smithsonian as well as the content with the drafting and painting course. The scope of the course asked the students to select a current full-length play and then use that material as a motivation for choosing their scenic design. They were asked to construct a composite of the design that showed 3 painted textures evident in the full design. So we started off with the text, which was a play currently done in the DC area. But then we moved on to a theoretical presentation of the play if it were done in the student's point of view. But beyond that, we materialized that theoretical viewpoint in the recreation of a composite of the design and created painting textures so that it concreted, is that a verb? Concreted the design idea in material form. So the class experienced design concepts, painting techniques, and drafting technology. We also applied the painting techniques and computer-aided drafting methods. And we developed concepts of identity definition and self-perception and identified ways people in America express themselves and their identities. We visited the Smithsonian Folkways collections to discuss different time periods, environments, the use of supporting materials. We also visited online collections, and we worked with the CAD projects from Vectorworks located in Columbia, Maryland. We visited on-site at the museums, the exhibit War of 1812, A Nation Emerges, Art of Video Games, which was right next door and a floor down. We also went over to the Hirshhorn and visited the Ai Weiwei According to What exhibit, but on the way we visited some permanent collections at the Hirshhorn Museum as well. Now this is rather small, but this helps give you an idea of what we really did, because we did a lot that past semester. And we visited the Smithsonian sites in person and also virtually. And we discovered artifacts that bridge that gap between the existing research and burgeoning creativity, which means that the students found a piece in the museum and used that to motivate their choices to create the scenic design. The students chose the plays with which to work and artifacts with which to base their motivation. And so I did not choose the plays for the students. They saw a list of the plays that were being done in the DC area, and they chose the play that they found connection with and then worked from that as a starting point. By doing so, they made choices and created a piece that expressed their views. They had placed a part of themselves on display in the museum for all to see, and they placed, in essence, their own identity, entirety or in part, in public view. And so they took their design, created that design, but placed it in the museum in which they found that artifact that motivated their choices. Student reactions. This is what they had to say. What I found special about the visit was the way I viewed each exhibit, and not just as an interesting piece of art or history, but more as a source of inspiration. It gave each exhibit a new life, even if I had already seen that exhibit half a dozen times before. It was a fun experience going and building a show inside the Smithsonian Museum, and also a challenge by using artifacts in our projects. I would not mind doing it again. And so the three projects that they had to do, the first was a floor plan, and that's a map, a bird's eye view of what the stage effects would look like if viewed from above. It's a map that we use to arrange the furniture on the stage for the actors. The faux finish then takes a look at that design and creates, asks the student to create part of that texture that they would see in the design, whether it be wood, concrete, metal. They were to take their design and recreate in a composite form those textures that they were going to use for their play. And finally, this was an effort to compile their work into a portfolio that they could show at a four-year school or at a prospective employer. So the play selections that they chose out of the 60 to 70 plays that were being done in the DC area, the first, Brian, chose Behanding in Spokane. The second, Ian, chose Reels. The third was A Man, His Wife, and His Hat that Juan chose. And then finally, Clockwork Orange, Dennis chose to work with, and Jitendra chose to work with Black Watch. All of these are being produced in the DC area. Man, His Wife, and His Hat opens in April. Reels has already gone past. Clockwork Orange, I think, has already opened in November, and Black Watch was done, I think, in November as well. So we started with our identity and analyzing our identity through a little bit of background work and looking introspectively as to what is in the play as well as what is in us as artists. And so Brian developed a haiku for himself. I'm a gigantic, slow beast, he says. I'm talentless, talented, and thought, and I have quiet, fleeting touch. However, his play, sometimes we found that it was a comparison, sometimes we found that it was a parallel. In his play, Behanding in Spokane, had twisted tree of hands, frameless painting, hands askew, and the bow tie breaks the mood. Ian developed his self-haiku. He's just a theater tech. Eat, drink, and be merry, he says, laid back, he's easygoing. In his play, though, he wanted it to be simple. So he had crates, boxes strewn about, pallets on top of them, and something to make a table. And Juan, his self-haiku, says, friendly person he is. I am very hyper person, that makes me who I am, yeah. And A Man, His Wife, and His Hat, the play that he chose, the haiku that he developed for that was lost a hat, lost a wife, lost yet found truth about who I am in the world. And so through this haiku, we also found that the play had something to do with them, and the reason they chose it had something either to do with their choice in parallel or in contradiction to who they were as people and artists. Juan's pictures that he chose to motivate his choices had to do with the word journey, and so he chose this picture to help him choose color as well as composition for his design, as well as asked him to figure out what the meaning was in the play that he was trying to design. He also had fear of the unknown as one of his motivating phrases. And then we also had fear of being out of place. This almost is a set design in itself, I told him. I mean, we have the backdrop there, we have questions of balance and composition, as well as color choices that he could choose. So Ian decided that he wanted to have pictures that were broken and empty for his play, as well as shadowy. And these were not only had some influence in who they were, but these were pictures that were expressing what they wanted to see in their play. And so they were choosing these pictures to motivate their choices to create the design, but we also found that there was parallel with them as artists and the play that they chose and what the playwright was creating. Brian chose this picture for Incomplete. This is the picture that he found in the National Portrait Gallery, I think it was, for Stressed. And also he chose Gloomy. And so we also furthered our investigation of the Smithsonian resources by doing some scavenger hunts that were online using the resources. And this is just a map of the method that we were to choose. I gave them this prompt as a directive as to how to get to the choices that I wanted them to analyze. And so they were searching the 19th century interiors online. And they I asked them to go find the picture of Takoma Park and asked them to identify the picture and tell me the information that went along with the picture. When was Takoma Park created, I asked them. I asked them to go to find the picture of interior of a library and asked them to find out how many pictures were on that left wall, or right wall. And then on page 4 of the searches, I asked them to find who was sitting in the green drawing room of the Earl Essex of Castleberry. And so this picture is the answer to number 3. It was created in 1890. It's rather blurry because the thumbnails are small. But we were choosing these pictures because they were giving us an interior design. And if we needed to research what an interior design looked like, we could go to these pictures. And the interior of a library, right there. This site did not allow us to reproduce entirely, and so off the picture to the upper right-hand corner you see 5 paintings. The answer is 5 paintings above the sideboard there. And then finally, the green drawing room, a lady in blue sitting at the piano in the lower left-hand corner. We furthered our online experience by looking at the Smithsonian Folkways to get some sound ideas. And we looked to the left menu and we browsed by genre for sounds. We selected music and carousels and the hand organ to ask how long is Strauss's Blue Danube. It was 1 minute and 43 seconds. The lost chord, what instrument was it played on? It was played on the Concert Regina. And also, what track is 2 minutes and 17 seconds long? It's what setting would it be appropriate? And it was a calliope sound that we could place in an amusement park. Again, we were using these to motivate our choices because these sound bites we could use in getting an idea of the environment in which we could set our play. And finally, our last online search was one where we went to the Cooper Hewitt collection at the National Design Museum. And we searched on the left-hand side of the library. We selected on Shedding Light and the Caldwell collection, and then we searched to look through the Caldwell binders for an example of a lighting fixture that we could create using the CAD program that we were going to experience that semester. And so I asked them to choose a not too complicated one because these artifacts could get very complicated. And so this is an example of a chandelier that was found at the Cooper Hewitt exhibit. Oops, we're backing up one moment. We then looked further into the collections at the National Portrait Gallery as well as the online collections and investigated what the ideas of composition were. And so using this picture that was found online, we looked to examine the different aspects not only of what the painters were experiencing, but looking at the identity of the subject matter and how we were defining the American identity of the subjects that the artists were using. We used this as a jumping off point, and this is not chosen by myself. This is something that the students selected that motivated them to analyze not only the color use, but also the composition, in that even though this figure has a simple arrangement, we were also looking at how the line that the artist was creating. This is not a picture. The painter decided to create line this way and to have the braids hanging down at the shoulders and to have the subject hold the knife in such a manner. And we also investigated how that line and how that composition related to the composition as a whole, and not only as how the artist saw the subject that the artist was painting. But we contrasted this as well. We contrasted this with what artists were doing with the same type of subject matter in a different time period. We analyzed the subject in the same form and looking at line, looking at color, and looking at the composition of the picture, but then we went beyond and looked at how the subject related its identity to the artist and how that could be received by someone viewing the picture just simply as a picture. And so we started off with the nitty-gritty of the course. We had to learn CAD from the get-go. The computer-aided drafting program we had to learn because that was part of what we as theater designers need to do and get into our tool belt. Luckily for me, the Vectorworks authors live in Columbia and work in Columbia. And so their education director came down and did some hands-on workshops with the artists, the students in the class. And so Brian is here in the background. And then Ian is in the middle with Juan at the side, and this is Mr. Frank Brote from Vectorworks, the software company. He came down for 3 workshops, and they learned the ins and outs and nuts and bolts of the program from the ground up. We went down to the Hirshhorn Museum as well as visiting the other sites in person, and we took pictures, if we were allowed, to use as research and use as the actual artifacts that we were going to put into our designs. And so Dennis here was capturing this design element that he was going to use in A Clockwork Orange. Jitendra stopped at the Ai Weiwei exhibit to examine rubble, and in his play Black Watch, it had to do with the Scottish Black Watch Regiment that was in Iraq. And in that play there was a lot of explosions, and he wanted to show rubble in his set. And so he needed to take pictures, and at the Ai Weiwei exhibit, where Ai Weiwei took pictures of the Japanese earthquake, he used those same elements to create his own design. And he also used this one also in the Hirshhorn Museum. This is rebar that is from some of the destroyed schools in Japan from the earthquake. So we also experienced some times of reflection, and I asked the students to reflect on the choices that they were making. And so you've chosen 3 words to drive your design. What are those 3 words that describe you, and what pictures could you use to describe yourself? I don't have those pictures, we've seen some of those before, but they said, and this is Brian's response, that on this day the first word that comes to mind is small. And certainly not in the physical sense of the word. I'm a giant standing next to many contemporaries. However, in the grand sense of the word around us and the universe as a whole, I'm an insignificant speck, drifting around in the great sea of insignificant specks, hoping that maybe for one moment in my short life I might be noticed by the universe, but aware that I likely won't be. So it's at this point that we've not only chosen a visual form, a visual object, but we're starting to create a connection between what is out there and what is in ourselves, and what do we put into ourselves to create that design. And so we're branching out from not only the artifact that we see in the world around us, but what is it in ourselves that we are putting on the stage every time that we create a design? Do we make a comment? How much of ourselves do we put on the stage? And oh my gosh, how much have I done at that point and put on my stage without realizing it? His second word was segues to his next word, and it is not pessimistic, but it's pragmatic. At least from his own perspective, I like to think of it myself as well grounded and realistic as to what could be accomplished reasonably and not get swept away in grand ideas and fantasies. The third word that pops into his head is, as he sits there thinking, is prismatic. It's slightly a bit more abstract but sensible. I am a man of many experiences, many words, many colors, all combined in one single beam of human being, and the entire spectrum of my perception and my existence in light of his personality reflecting off the world around me. And it's interesting that he was starting at this point to see how much of himself he was putting in the playwright's words and putting in to the realization of the set that he was putting on the stage. And it was amazing to see that set and to see his realization that that set was going into a museum, and so he was kind of putting himself into the museum as part of the exhibit. You've chosen those 3 words that drive your design. What are those 3 words, and where do you see each of these words occur in your play? The first word was incomplete. It comes from the character of Carmichael, and the search for missing appendage and taking all of his life, it's yet not over, not even the end of the play. He won't feel as a whole until he finds that part of himself, despite it being completely worthless and attached to him. And even when he finds out that he finally did find it, can we really see this as a being worthwhile existence? Can wasting away your youth searching for a lost piece of yourself make you feel complete in the end? I ask these questions because I asked them to make that connection with the playwright, to see how they relate to the play and how the play relates to themselves as artists, in the hopes that they would find that they've made a connection with choosing the play, but they've made that connection through something in themselves that caused them to make those choices. His next word was stressed, to go along with the image of that he had chosen that picture. And then finally he chose gloomy, and I asked him to describe how you would fit gloomy into the set design. So Juan's reflections were such along the lines that he sees himself a bit in the play, mainly my family and how we have come to the States, how one comes and makes new life in a new country, and how the next generation is better than the one that came in. I'm technically an immigrant, but yet I finished high school in the U.S. and see myself more as a first-generation U.S. person. And so through this question, what made you choose the play that you selected, and what part of yourself do you see in the play that made you want to choose it? They are embracing the subject matter as well as where they stand in regard to themselves as the artist and how they're going to communicate to the audience. So what made you choose the pictures in the play that you select as part of your research, and where do you see these pictures in yourself? When I was first looking for the pictures, I was only looking at the broad picture. I was not looking at the specific details. And at the end, some of the pictures I was getting kind of represented some of the things that I liked, and also how I tend to process things. I'm a person who's fast and sometimes is a bad, and things that tend to crumble if one is not careful. And so they're starting to get an idea and a concept of the responsibility that is on their shoulders as designers, and the comments that they're making in a corporation with the playwright. Because we as designers are not working on our own, we're collaborating with the other design staff as a whole. What in your design elements do you see in your research, and where do you in your design do you see part of yourself? The area that I did the most amount of research had to do with the different textures of paint I wanted, and also with the color. I see a little bit of an old cartoon I used to see called Courage the Cowardly Dog. At first I did part of the set without realizing, and then I used it more of a guide for part of my design. So at the end of the process, they were realizing and finally taking a step back to see what they have done and realize their connection from beginning to end, that they were incorporating not only the process, but themselves in the process, not only as artists, but in part as subject matter that they were putting into the museum. So in the drafting and painting course, helped you see elements in yourself? You could use that in design in your future. It was a great class for me to figure out how to more properly design sets and other designs for the shows in the future. This is a great way to experiment more with paint and also different textures and different techniques. One of the things that I will always take from class and apply it in future is the idea of the family, the big dad, medium mom, and small child. This was the techniques that we use to make a composition on the set so that it becomes balanced or imbalanced to our needs. The final outcomes. This is Brian. And that was Brian. And here's Brian again. And this is a composite. Brian had a public viewing of his portfolio for the course at our holiday party that we hold every Christmas in the theater department. It's open to the campus at large, and on one side are the projects that our stagecraft does with his strictly painting, but on the other side is the projects from the drafting and painting class. And Brian showed a composite of his design here with a radiator, the wallpaper that he recreated, and a column that you can see in the design once we see that. But he built the radiator, he built the walls, he built the floor, and then he painted them to look realistically what he wanted to see in the design. Hanging below here is his floor plan, the map that the set would be. And that map looks like this. And so he created this in Vectorworks, not knowing before this class how to do CAD. And so he, from the ground up, learned the basic process to create this map, this floor plan that we used. And this is his set design. And these are the walls. Right there is the radiator. And so this is the interior environment that he wanted to create for Hengen and Spokane. And this is the rendering that he created. So hopefully you can see that there are pillars in the back. The radiator is down here, and these are actors that he placed and lit for his design. This is Ian. Ian created, again, this was Reels. And we kind of experienced a little serendipity in that the playwright for Reels is DC based. And so we actually had the playwright come and talk to us about his play. And Ian used that experience to help, again, further his motivation for his choices. Ian created the graffiti and the brick wall in the back. Ian created a broken window and the pallets. He built himself and then painted. He created the floor plan, again through CAD and Vectorworks, and then he created the 3D rendering. And finally, Juan had some projections for his project, and so that's what the Hello Hello are. We hooked up a projector and shined it down on his project. He recreated the brick wall, the floor, a ramp that he would use in his design. Created the floor plan, as well as created a 3D rendering. It was quite a ride. I did not let them do this on their own. I selected a play, Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, that again was being done in the DC area. We went down and visited the War of 1812 exhibit because that's the exhibit that I used to motivate my choices for my design. And so I used my experience and my design as a model for them to follow. And so in the class and in subsequent classes in years previous and years following, we will do the same thing. We will go down to the Smithsonian Museum and do the same experiments. But again, I do the modeling of the process so that they can follow me along in my steps as they do steps on their own designs. The Smithsonian Fellowship has been quite an experience. It's been a lot to me, and I'm very grateful to be a part of it. I now possess more classroom tools to offer my students and way to discuss pertinent issues because the Smithsonian theme changes from year to year, and I plan on following that if I can, following that theme and exposing my students to those same themes. And they have now a way to illustrate, and I have a way to illustrate, the practical application of the design concepts. Thank you very much.